Imagine owning one of the most prestigious hotels in the city, a place you've poured your heart and soul into perfecting every detail to create a luxurious haven for travelers. Now picture deciding to visit this hotel incognito, dressed in casual clothes, eager to experience your establishment. Through the eyes of a regular guest, no formal greetings, no special treatment, just a simple check-in, a meal, and a chance to see firsthand if everything is up to the standards you set. But what happens when you're met with cold stares, dismissive comments, and ultimately shocking discrimination from your very own staff? This is exactly what happened to Rebecca Taylor, a successful entrepreneur and hotel owner who stepped into her hotel in jeans and a plain shirt, hoping to blend in. Little did she know the way she was dressed, and perhaps even the color of her skin, would lead to her being turned away, denied service, and also ultimately escorted off the property by security, all without the staff realizing that she was the very person who signed their paychecks. The irony was hard to miss. Rebecca, the architect of this grand hotel, had meticulously built a brand that was supposed to welcome everyone with warmth and class. Instead, she found herself judged and dismissed simply because she didn't fit the superficial image her staff had in mind. What would you do if you were in her shoes? Would you reveal your identity immediately? Or would you keep it hidden, digging deeper to uncover the full extent of the issue? Stay tuned as Rebecca's story unfolds with unexpected twists, unmasking a network of prejudice and corruption within the very walls she built. This is more than just a story about facing discrimination. It's a journey of standing up for fairness, equality, and the truth. Follow along as Rebecca goes from an unrecognized guest to a fierce owner determined to reclaim her hotel and ensure it becomes a place where everyone, no matter their background, is treated with respect and dignity. You won't believe the surprising turns this story takes. Rebecca Taylor, a successful hotel. Rebecca Taylor owner had built her career and reputation from the ground up. Owning a luxury hotel had always been her dream, and she poured every bit of her passion and energy into making it a sanctuary of elegance, comfort, and service. But after years of overseeing operations and watching her staff catered to guests from a distance, she decided it was time to see her hotel through a different lens, that of an average guest. No reserved greetings, no special treatment, just a simple anonymous visit to her pride and joy. On the day of her unannounced visit, Rebecca opted for a simple outfit: well-worn jeans, a plain t-shirt, and comfort-able sneakers. She wanted to blend in as much as possible, hoping her casual appearance would allow her to slip through unnoticed by her staff. The decision was intentional. She knew she would only get an authentic experience if her team had no idea she was watching. As she looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror before stepping out of her car, she took a deep breath, feeling a mix of excitement and curiosity about what awaited her inside. Rebecca's heart swelled with pride as she walked through the entrance of her hotel, taking in the splendor she had worked so hard to create. The lobby was nothing short of magnificent, every inch a testament to her vision. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a warm, inviting glow across the polished marble floors that gleamed like mirrors. Elegant art pieces adorned the walls, and the subtle aroma of fresh flowers mixed with the luxurious scent of leather and wood from the plush furnishings. The gentle hum of conversation and soft background music added to the ambience, creating an atmosphere that felt both lively and sophisticated. For a moment, Rebecca simply stood in awe, watching guests and staff move seamlessly through the space. Her hotel looked exactly as she had envisioned, an oasis of beauty and refinement. She noticed the concierge assisting a group of guests with a genuine smile, and saw bellhops carrying luggage with ease, as though their service was a practiced art form. The sight brought a smile to her face. Everything appeared to be running smoothly, at least from her initial perspective. Feeling reassured, she made her way to the front desk, ready to request a room. She wanted to see the check-in process from a guest's viewpoint, observe the kind of welcome her staff extended to an everyday visitor. As she approached the desk, a young man in a crisp suit stood behind the counter, busy tapping away at his computer screen. Rebecca waited patiently for a moment, but as the second stretched, she noticed he hadn't looked up or acknowledged her presence. Clearing her throat lightly, she stepped forward, hoping to draw his attention. The receptionist glanced at her briefly, his eyes barely lifting from the screen, Before he went back to typing, his expression indifferent. Rebecca was slightly taken aback, but decided to brush it off, thinking he might be busy or distracted. She waited a few more seconds, but when it became clear he wasn't going to greet her, she finally spoke up. "Good afternoon," she said, her tone polite but firm. "I'd like to check in, please." The receptionist raised his eyebrows, finally giving her a full look, but instead of a welcoming smile or an offer of assistance, he merely frowned, his gaze scanning her from head to toe. She could feel the judgment in his eyes as he took in her simple clothes and lack of luggage without a hint of warmth in his voice. He replied, "Do you have a reservation?" Rebecca, surprised by the coldness in his tone, shook her head calmly. "No, I was hoping I could book a room for tonight." The receptionist's expression shifted slightly, as though he was evaluating her worthiness of staying in the hotel. "This is a luxury hotel, ma'am," he said, his voice laced with subtle condescension. "We have a certain standard for our guests here. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at another hotel nearby." Rebecca felt a pang of shock at his words. She had always wanted her hotel to be a place where every guest, regardless of appearance or background, felt welcome. And yet here she was standing in front of her own receptionist, being dismissed without a second thought. She could feel her cheeks flush slightly, a mixture of surprise and disappointment bubbling up within her. "Is there a problem with booking a room here?" she asked, keeping her voice steady, even as her frustration grew. She hoped her calm tone would prompt him to reconsider his attitude. The receptionist sighed, clearly uninterested in changing his approach. "We're quite full at the moment," he said, though Rebecca could see the guest ledger on his desk, indicating multiple rooms were still available. "Like I said, maybe another place would be a better fit." Rebecca's initial shock began to settle into something else, an uneasy realization. She knew that if she revealed her identity, the man would likely apologize and scramble to make things right. But this wasn't about her. It was about understanding how her staff treated all guests, especially those who didn't meet their preconceived standards. She decided to press on testing the boundaries of his hospitality. "Unwilling to pay whatever the rate is," she said, her voice still calm but firm. "Could you please check for availability?" He hesitated, his face tightening with irritation, but finally began typing begrudgingly into his computer. After a moment, he gave her a brief nod. "We have one room available," he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't thrilled about it. "Thank you," Rebecca replied, her patience wearing thin, but still holding on to her composure as she finished the check-in process and took her room key. She couldn't shake the nagging feeling in her chest. The disappointment she felt was deeper than she had anticipated. How many other guests had been turned away or treated with indifference simply because they didn't fit the image her staff seemed to expect. Walking away from the desk, Rebecca resolved to dig deeper. This encounter at the front desk was just the beginning. She intended to see for herself if this was an isolated incident, or if it reflected a larger, more troubling attitude within her hotel. As she took her first steps toward her room, she knew she was about to uncover the true state of her business, one interaction at a time. Rebecca Taylor, still reeling from one interaction, her uncomfortable check-in experience, decided to press on, silently observing the behavior of her staff. Without revealing her true identity, she couldn't shake the chill that had settled in her after being dismissed so abruptly. There she was in the very hotel she dreamed up, funded, and managed, only to be treated as if she were unworthy of the comfort she herself had created. After the encounter at the front desk, Rebecca decided to test the service in other parts of the hotel. She made her way over to the main lobby area, intending to sit down for a moment, take in the ambience, and observe how other guests were treated. As she watched, she saw other patrons approach the front desk, each receiving cheerful welcomes and warm, engaging smiles from the staff. A well-dressed couple arrived, and the same receptionist who had dismissed her minutes earlier was all charm and attentiveness, even offering to upgrade their room to ensure the finest experience possible. Rebecca felt a pang of frustration rise within her, realizing the stark difference in treatment. She wondered how many guests had experienced the same type of disregard. She had simply because they didn't look the part. Determined not to let this single encounter define her entire hotel experience, she walked over to the hotel's restaurant to test the service there. As she approached the entrance, she was greeted by a hostess standing behind a sleek, polished podium. The young woman, with a distant look on her face, barely glanced up as Rebecca approached. "Good evening," Rebecca said, hoping that her polite approach would make a difference. The hostess finally looked up, her eyes sweeping over Rebecca's casual attire. Her brow furrowed slightly, and a faintly patronizing look flickered across her face. "Do you have a reservation?" she asked, her tone cool. Rebecca replied, "No, I was hoping I could get a table for one. It's just me." The hostess didn't bother to check the reservation book or even glance into the dining area. "We're fully booked tonight," she said briskly. "Maybe you could try somewhere else nearby." Rebecca was stunned from her vantage point. She could clearly see multiple empty tables scattered throughout the restaurant. It wasn't even peak dinner time yet, and there was no visible rush of patrons waiting to be seated. She felt a sinking feeling in her stomach, realizing that the problem seemed to go beyond a single dismissive receptionist, not one to let something slide without understanding the full picture. She decided to probe further. "I understand, but are you sure there's absolutely no room? I can see a few open tables right now," she said, gesturing toward the vacant spots with a polite smile. The hostess barely glanced in the direction Rebecca indicated they're reserved. She replied curtly, her eyes narrowing, as if daring Rebecca to push the matter further. Rebecca felt her patience begin to wane. The attitude, the dismissive tone, and the reluctance to even make an effort to accommodate her, all of it grated on her in ways she hadn't expected. But she held her composure. Years of running a successful business had taught her the importance of keeping a level head in tense situations. She leaned forward, slightly lowering her voice. "Are you turning me away because of the way I'm dressed? Or is there another reason you're not willing to serve me?" The hostess shifted uncomfortably, clearly caught off guard by the question. For a moment, she hesitated, her confident facade cracking just enough to reveal an underlying discomfort. But it was fleeting. She quickly composed herself and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we are fully booked. If you'd like, I can recommend a few other places that might be more suited to your needs." The last word hung in the air, unspoken, but understood. Rebecca felt a surge of the last word, indignation, rise within her. She could reveal her identity in an instant, watch this hostess's attitude dissolve into apologies, and perhaps even see her scramble to make up for her behavior. But doing so would cut short her ability to see the full picture. No, Rebecca thought she needed to understand just how deep this went to know if this was merely a problem with one or two staff members, or a cultural issue permeating her entire establishment. With a controlled breath, she nodded politely. "Thank you. I'll explore other options," she said, choosing her words carefully. Rebecca turned and left the restaurant, her mind now racing with a mixture of frustration and sadness. This hotel was her creation, a place where she had envisioned an atmosphere of inclusivity, luxury, and warmth for everyone. The fact that her own staff was turning away guests based on appearance or attire and likely other judgments she hadn't yet seen was a bitter pill to swallow. Determined to keep digging, she decided to sit in the lounge for a moment, thinking through her next steps. As she took a seat, she couldn't help but notice how effortlessly the staff attended to other patrons around her, their interactions marked by friendliness and professionalism. A group of guests nearby, all dressed in fine attire, were offered refreshments and complimentary treats as they waited, yet Rebecca, sitting alone in her casual outfit, was ignored as though she didn't exist in their world. Rebecca's thoughts were interrupted when her phone buzzed with a message from her assistant, Emma. It read, "Everything running smoothly at the hotel." The timing of the message was almost laughable. For a moment, Rebecca considered replying with the truth, but decided to hold off, not wanting to escalate the situation before she fully understood the scope of the problem. Her thoughts were still racing when she noticed another member of the staff, a well-dressed man in a sleek uniform, glancing in her direction. He approached her, his expression formal but polite. "Good evening, ma'am. May I assist you with anything?" he asked, though there was an edge to his tone that felt more like a formality than genuine hospitality. Rebecca decided to take him up on his offer. "Yes, actually," she replied. "Could you please direct me to the nearest elevator?" The man nodded, but there was something in his demeanor, an air of reluctance, as if he didn't truly want to engage with her. He pointed her toward the elevators and gave a short, almost dismissive smile before walking away. Rebecca's heart sank. The small, consistent signs of indifference and subtle prejudice were piling up, each interaction painting a clearer picture of an issue that went far beyond a single rude receptionist. She couldn't help but wonder if this was how they treated a guest who merely appeared to be of a lower economic status. How would they respond to others who didn't fit their unspoken standards? Before heading up to her room, she made one last attempt to see if her experience would improve. She approached the concierge's desk, hoping that this part of the staff might break the trend of discourteous behavior. But as she reached the counter, the concierge, a middle-aged woman with a meticulously styled appearance, looked up, gave Rebecca a cursory glance, and then returned her attention to her computer without a word. "Excuse me," Rebecca said after a few moments, hoping to get the woman's attention. The concierge barely lifted her eyes. "Yes," Rebecca forced a smile, masking her growing frustration. "I was wondering if there are any local recommendations for dinner nearby." The woman's lips pressed into a thin line as she looked at Rebecca, clearly unimpressed. "There's a diner a few blocks down," she replied curtly, as if the mere act of speaking to Rebecca was an inconvenience. Rebecca felt an overwhelming sense of disappointment. She had designed this hotel to embody a refined, welcoming atmosphere, a place where everyone would feel valued and catered to, yet here she was treated as if she were less than, undeserving of the hospitality she herself had worked so hard to cultivate. She left the concierge desk and finally made her way to the elevator, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She felt embarrassed, saddened, and above all betrayed. The prejudices she had witnessed weren't just isolated incidents. They were signs of a deeper cultural flaw within her hotel, one that she hadn't recognized until now. As she rode the elevator up to her room, she resolved to take action, but she would do so carefully, strategically. Revealing her identity now wouldn't fix the root of the problem. No, she needed to fully understand the extent of the issues within her hotel's walls before she could address them effectively. With that decision made, Rebecca prepared herself for the challenging journey ahead, determined to reclaim her vision for her hotel and ensure it became a place of respect and inclusivity for all. After her disappointing experience at the front desk and her unsuccessful attempt to gather recommendations from revisiting the restaurant, the concierge, Rebecca decided to return to the hotel restaurant one more time. She thought maybe, just maybe, her experience earlier had been a fluke. Perhaps the hostess had genuinely misjudged the availability of tables or had been preoccupied with other tasks. She took a deep breath, shook off her growing frustration, and approached the restaurant entrance. Once more, the hostess, the same young woman as before, was standing behind the podium, scrolling through a tablet with a distant, disinterested look on her face. When she noticed Rebecca approaching, she let out a small sigh, clearly unenthused about their interaction. "Hello again," Rebecca said politely, hoping to make this exchange a little more pleasant. "I was wondering if there's a chance you might have a table available now." The hostess looked up, and without even glancing toward the restaurant seating area, she shook her head. "As I mentioned earlier, we're fully booked," she replied flatly. Rebecca glanced past the hostess, her eyes taking in the numerous empty tables scattered throughout the room. Some were set with fresh silverware and menus, clearly prepared for guests. Rebecca's patience was waning, but she forced herself to keep calm. "I see quite a few open tables," she said, pointing to the vacant spots. "Are those reserved?" The hostess's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes, they're reserved," she replied curtly, not bothering to elaborate further. Rebecca's patience was wearing thin, but she maintained her composure. "I don't mean to press, but it does look like you have more than enough availability. I would be happy to wait, or if a table opens up, I wouldn't mind being notified." The hostess crossed her arms, her expression growing increasingly cold. "Ma'am," she said, her voice dripping with irritation, "I don't think this is the kind of establishment that suits you. There are plenty of other places nearby that might be more suitable." The implication was clear, and Rebecca felt a surge of indignation rise within her. For the first time, she realized the issue went beyond her attire or a simple misunderstanding. This was a direct attempt to dismiss her based solely on a perception that she somehow didn't belong in her own establishment. Before she could say another word, the hostess gave her a final dismissive look and turned her attention back to the tablet, effectively ending the conversation. Rebecca's heart pounded with a mixture of disbelief and frustration. How could this be happening? And why did her own staff think it was acceptable to treat anyone this way? Determined to keep her identity concealed for now, Rebecca turned away from the podium and started to walk back toward the incident lobby. As she did, she noticed a couple entering the restaurant. They too approached the hostess without a reservation, but instead of being turned away, they were greeted with a smile, escorted to one of the reserved tables, and handed menus with a warm welcome. Rebecca's heart sank further, realizing that this wasn't an isolated incident. Her staff was making assumptions about who was worthy of their best service and who was not. As she watched the couple settle into their table, her thoughts were interrupted by a stern voice from behind her. "Ma'am, we need you to leave." Rebecca turned around, surprised to see two uniformed security guards standing behind her, both with firm expressions. Her initial shock quickly shifted to control. She hadn't caused a scene, hadn't raised her voice. And yet here were security guards treating her as if she were some sort of troublemaker. "Excuse me," she asked, her voice a mixture of confusion and frustration. "Is there a problem?" One of the guards stepped forward. "We've been informed that you're causing a disturbance and that management would prefer if you vacated the premises." Rebecca was at a loss for words. A disturbance? She had been nothing but polite, even in the face of the subtle and not so subtle dismissal she'd experienced. Her frustration, which she'd kept bottled up, now began to peak. But she knew that if she lost her composure, it would only confirm the assumptions they'd already made about her. "I'm a paying guest," she replied, struggling to keep her tone steady. "I've done nothing wrong and have simply been trying to enjoy the amenities of the hotel. I don't see why I'm being asked to leave." The guard's expression softened slightly, as if realizing how unfair the situation was, but he quickly masked it, maintaining his professional stance. "We just following orders, ma'am. If you refuse to leave, we'll have to escort you out." Rebecca took a deep breath, glancing around the lobby. Other guests were beginning to stare, whispering among themselves as they watched the scene unfold. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, a bitter sensation rising in her throat. She was the owner of this establishment, and yet she was being treated as if she were some kind of trespasser. She was tempted in that very moment to reveal her identity, to make these guards understand that she was not someone they could just push around. But she held back. Reacting in anger wouldn't help. It would only cloud her judgment and make it harder for her to get to the bottom of the issue. Besides, she wanted to uncover just how widespread this treatment was. If they were willing to act this way toward her, a stranger in their eyes, how many other guests had faced similar hostility? "All right," she said, her voice measured but firm. "I'll leave." She turned and walked slowly toward the exit, aware of the security guards following closely behind. As she stepped outside into the cool evening air, she took a moment to gather her thoughts. The experience had been humiliating, to say the least, but it had also given her a newfound determination. She wasn't just going to walk away from this. Her hotel was her life's work, and she couldn't stand by and allow it to be a place where anyone was treated as lesser. She pulled out her phone and dialed her assistant, Emma, who answered on the first ring. "Emma, we have a serious issue," Rebecca said, her voice steady but laced with determination. "I need you to meet me first thing tomorrow morning in the office. We're going to get to the bottom of this." Emma's tone immediately shifted, sensing the gravity in Rebecca's voice. "Of course." "Rebecca, what happened?" Rebecca hesitated, not wanting to go into details over the phone. "It's a long story, but I'm starting to think there's a culture of discrimination happening right under my nose. I need to understand how deep this goes and who's responsible. We're going to investigate, but I need you to help me keep this quiet for now." Emma agreed without hesitation, and they set a time to meet the next day. Rebecca hung up and took a deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer just a guest during dismissive glances and rude comments. Now she was an owner with a mission to reclaim the hotel she had built and ensure it truly reflected her values of respect and hospitality for all. As she walked away from the hotel, Rebecca felt the sting of the night's events. The way she had been treated by her own staff was nothing short of appalling, but it had opened her eyes to a reality she couldn't ignore. She knew now that her presence as a silent observer, hidden from the staff's awareness, had exposed truths she wouldn't have seen otherwise. Her decision to go undercover had given her invaluable insight, and while it had been painful, it was necessary. She resolved to return this time, even more committed to uncovering the full extent of the issue. Tomorrow, she would step back into her role as the hotel's owner, not to flaunt her authority, But to ensure that her hotel-inclusive respectful space, she had always envisioned the next morning Rebecca met her assistant Emma in her office. Rebecca, the next morning, detailed the humiliating encounter she had experienced as a guest, recounting how the staff had treated her with blatant disregard, turning her away, ignoring her, and even having security escort her from her own hotel. Emma listened, her expression shifting from shock to anger. As the story unfolded, we need to get to the bottom of this. But we can't just rely on what happened yesterday, Rebecca said. I want to see if this is an isolated case, or if it's a pattern that affects other guests. I'll need to go undercover again. But this time we be strategic about it. Emma nodded, her eyes bright with determination. Whatever you need, I'm here to help. Rebecca explained her plan. She would return to the hotel under a false name, posing as a new guest checking in for a few days. This time, she would fully immerse herself in the experience, testing not only the reception and restaurant staff, but also room service, housekeeping, and any other services that her hotel offered. Emma quickly arranged a reservation under the name Renee Grant, ensuring that no one on the team would recognize it. They chose a room in one of the standard categories, so her stay would reflect the experience of a typical guest. When evening came, Rebecca arrived at the hotel, once more now with her cover fully in place. She wore a modest dress and minimal accessories, presenting a refined but simple appearance. Her goal was to blend in as much as possible, avoiding any indicators that might make the staff suspicious. She approached the front desk with a calm resolve, determined to see this plan through. A young woman different from the receptionist she had encountered the day before greeted her with a warm smile. Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to the Crescent Bay Hotel. How can I help you? Rebecca felt a glimmer of relief at the polite greeting, but reminded herself to remain cautious. I have a reservation under the name Renee Grant, she replied. The woman quickly typed into her computer, her smile never faltering. Yes, M. Grant, I see your reservation here for a 3-night stay. Let me get you checked in. She processed the reservation efficiently and handed over Rebecca's key card with a friendly nod. If you need any assistance, please don't hesitate to let us know. The check-in experience was smooth and professional, a stark contrast to the dismissive treatment she had received the day before. Rebecca thanked the receptionist and made her way to her room, already noting how differently she had been treated this time around. Once she was settled in her room, Rebecca planned her next move. She decided to test room service, curious to see if there would be any inconsistencies in the way it was handled. Picking up the phone, she ordered a simple dinner, a club sandwich with a side of fries and a glass of sparkling water. The voice on the other end was polite, assuring her that her order would arrive within 30 minutes. Exactly 30 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Rebecca opened it to find a middle-aged man in a neatly pressed uniform holding a tray with her meal. His demeanor was polite and professional, though she sensed a subtle shift in his expression as he took in her appearance. It was only a fleeting moment, but she noticed the way his gaze lingered on her simple attire. She thanked him, tipping generously, and watched as he quickly averted his eyes and offered a hurried goodbye. Rebecca sighed, wondering if she was reading too much into these interactions, but she trusted her instincts. There was an underlying tension in some of the staff's reactions, a faint discomfort that seemed to stem from her appearance. She jotted down notes, determined to keep a thorough record of every interaction she experienced. The following morning, Rebecca decided to visit the hotel's spa. It was one of the property's most praised features, offering an array of luxurious treatments designed to leave guests feeling rejuvenated and pampered. She approached the spa's reception area, where a woman greeted her with a smile that quickly faded as she looked Rebecca up and down. Good morning, Rebecca said politely. I'd like to book a massage. The receptionist hesitated, her gaze flickering over Rebecca's simple outfit. Do you have a reservation? She asked, her tone polite but distant. Rebecca shook her head. No, I was hoping there might be an opening later today. The woman gave a small, tight smile. I'll have to check. She tapped on her computer. Though Rebecca could sense her reluctance, it looks like we're fully booked for the day, she said finally. I might be able to fit you in tomorrow, But we prioritize reservations, Rebecca nodded, sensing the familiar chill she had felt from other staff members. She couldn't help but notice how other guests dressed in fine attire were welcomed warmly and offered spa treatments without hesitation. Feeling disheartened, Rebecca left the spa, adding another note to her growing list of observations. Throughout the day, Rebecca continued to test various areas of the hotel. She visited the pool, observed the service in the lounge, and engaged with housekeeping. Her observations were consistent. Guests who appeared wealthy or fashionable were greeted with enthusiasm and attended to immediately, while those who seemed less affluent, like herself in her current attire, were either ignored or treated with polite indifference. In the evening, Rebecca decided to dine at the restaurant. Once more, this time she was given a table without any trouble, though the hostess still looked at her with a faintly skeptical expression as she observed the other diners. She noted the contrast in the way wait staff interacted with guests. For those in expensive clothes or jewelry, the service was attentive and cheerful, while those in simpler attire received noticeably less attention. Rebecca's mind raced as she connected the dots. A clear pattern was emerging, one that exposed a deep-seated bias within her staff's attitudes toward guests. It wasn't just a matter of professionalism or efficiency. There was a cultural issue rooted in appearance-based judgments. Her own staff, the people she trusted to uphold the values of her establishment, were dividing guests into worthy and unworthy categories, based on little more than their outward appearance. As she finished her meal, Rebecca felt a growing sense of urgency to address the problem. She knew she couldn't continue to operate her hotel in conscience while allowing this behavior to go unchecked. Her undercover experience had revealed an unpleasant truth, but it also gave her the insight she needed to make real change. When she returned to her room that night, Rebecca called Emma to discuss her findings. "I've seen enough," she said, her voice resolute. "It's not just a few individuals. This is a widespread issue." Emma's response was filled with determination. "What's our next step?" "We going to address this from the top down," Rebecca replied. "Start with an investigation to gather more details and statements from employees who might have seen this happen. Then we'll confront the individuals responsible for creating and perpetuating this culture. And if it goes higher up, we'll deal with that too." As Rebecca hung up, she felt a mixture of relief and anger. Her mission was now clear. She had come to her hotel as an anonymous guest to understand the guest experience, and what she had uncovered was a far-reaching culture of bias and discrimination. It was painful to realize that her establishment had strayed so far from her ideals, but she knew she was the only one who could put it right. With a final look around her room, Rebecca steeled herself for the challenges ahead. The road wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to rebuild her hotel's reputation from the inside out. No guest, no matter their background, appearance, or perceived status, would ever feel unwelcome in her hotel again. The following day, Rebecca and Emma sat in Rebecca's office poring over documents and records that Emma had meticulously gathered. These weren't just any records. Emma had uncovered files that contained guest complaints and feedback spanning the past several years. While most reviews painted the hotel in a positive light, there were disturbing patterns hidden within. Several complaints highlighted a recurring issue: certain guests, often those who didn't fit the luxury image, were receiving subpar treatment. These complaints had either been downplayed or ignored, entirely swept under the rug to protect the hotel's pristine reputation. Rebecca felt a pang of guilt as she read through each complaint. Guests described feeling ignored, dismissed, or spoken to rudely by the staff, especially when they were casually dressed or appeared to be of a lower economic background. Some guests noted that they were turned away from the restaurant, even when tables were visibly empty. Just as Rebecca had experienced, others recounted being passed over by staff who seemed to prioritize more affluent-looking guests. Emma flipped to a particularly unsettling complaint from a guest who had requested an upgraded room, but was moved to a smaller one without explanation. When the guest asked why, they were told there were no available upgrades despite seeing other guests receiving them. Upon request, the guest had left a frustrated comment, feeling as if they'd been judged and undervalued based on appearance alone. "It's clear there's a systemic issue here," Emma said, her voice somber as she looked up from the papers. These aren't isolated incidents, Rebecca. This has been happening for a while. Rebecca sighed, leaning back in her chair and pinching the bridge of her nose. How did we let it get to this point? She muttered almost to herself. I never wanted my hotel to be a place where people were judged by their appearance or treated differently because of their background. Emma hesitated before
suggesting that his height would play a crucial role in the bout. However, Fury failed to leverage his physical advantage, and in the 9th round, Usyk stunned the former WBC champion with a decisive win. Several members of Fury's team feel that his performance was negatively impacted by the chaotic build-up to the fight leading up to his first scheduled bout with Usyk. The Gypsy King suffered a cut during sparring, which caused yet another delay to the already pushed-back matchup. As a result, he was unable to engage in sparring sessions before the fight, though he chose not to provide any reasoning for his underwhelming performance. The British boxing sensation is unwavering in his belief that sticking to a tried-and-true strategy is crucial to overcoming Usyk, insisting that his display in their initial encounter was sufficient to claim the win. He said, I know what I've got to do, nothing drastic. People can say I want to change trainers, or I'll blame it on me conditioning coach, or I'll blame it on the cook, or I'll blame it on the cook, or I'll blame it on the mouse next door. He added, for me, it is the same team, same everything. I know what I've got to do. I thought I won the fight last time. There's no secret I'm going in there to knock him out because I don't think I'm going to get a decision no matter what I do, so I have to take it out of the judge's hands. I believe I have to get him out of there. Alexander Usyk seems impervious to the psychological tactics that Tyson Fury thrives on. The Ukrainian relentless determination to succeed has fueled his rise to undisputed world champion in both the cruiserweight and heavyweight classes, establishing him as the first professional to defeat Fury as the two prepare for their highly anticipated rematch on December 21st. The question arises, while Fury may hold the physical edge, will it be enough for him to avenge his earlier loss? Todd Dew, president of Fury's co-promoter Top Rank, told Skyports, I don't know the gamesmanship Tyson plays, but I do think stylistically he's going to have to be really focused for the entire 12 rounds. Usyk is terrific. He has shown that he's a wonderful fighter, an incredible heavyweight who transitioned from a lighter division up to heavyweight, and he seems like you're not going to faze him at all. Mentally, a showdown between Dubois and Fury, both British fighters, could be an electrifying spectacle, especially if the undisputed heavyweight world title hung in the balance for the winner. Dubois said, stylistically, Dubois a puncher against a big boxer. I think it sets up for a fantastic stylistic fight, a real contrast of styles. Then you could get the undisputed all over again. It's really fascinating. DJ Vlad, the YouTube interviewer and podcaster, recently dropped the 9th part of his conversation with Bill Haney, father of boxing champion Devin Haney. Covering a range of topics, the Ukrainian-American host delved into the much-anticipated Alexander Usyk versus Tyson Fury rematch and asked Haney a key thought-provoking question. 5. Like many others, Haney was shocked by the Cat's surprising victory over the then unbeaten British fighter and was won over right away. Reflecting on the upcoming rematch, Haney admitted he hadn't anticipated Usyk's dominant performance against Fury, but now he was convinced of Usyk's skill. He confidently predicted that Usyk would once again surpass Fury, securing a 2 record shortly after. DJ Vlad remarked on Fury's status as a real fighter, despite his less than typical build for a world champion boxer. In reply, Haney emphasized that Fury's fighting heritage played a crucial role, pointing to his father John Fury as a strategic mastermind in the sport. Haney expressed his expectation for a hard-fought battle, noting that he was certain Tyson would come fully prepared when pressed about his pick for the outcome. Haney stuck to his prediction, confidently backing Alexander Usyk to secure a defend victory, responding with yes. 6. Although their initial clash brought in a substantial fortune, it ultimately failed to break even. Nevertheless, the event ignited widespread anticipation, setting high hopes for the much anticipated rematch between Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury. So what exactly went wrong in their first encounter? The initial clash between Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury proved to be a major financial triumph, with over 1.5 million pay-per-view purchases predominantly from the UK market. This resulted in an impressive $50 million in revenue. In addition to this, the event generated a further $40 million from advertising and $3 million in ticket sales. Reports suggest the total purse for the fight reached approximately $150 million, with the payout split as follows. Fury was assured 70% of the earnings, translating to around $15 million, while Usyk was expected to receive about $45 million. Despite the event's commercial success, it appears that the generated revenue fell short of covering the total expenses, which surpassed $120 million. A significant factor in this financial shortfall was the rampant piracy of the broadcast. Roughly 20 million viewers watched via illegal streams, with nearly 45% of them located in Europe and 18% in the UK. Tony Bell admitted he was surprised by how easily Alexander Usyk dominated Tyson Fury in their initial encounter. Despite the odds being stacked against him, the British fighter remains confident that the Gypsy King can avenge that defeat in an interview. With the Express, Bell expressed his astonishment at how much Fury struggled in their first bout. Bell added this time he will be a lot more sad and a lot more aware. It's insane that a man who is 6', and just 100 kilos was able to bully this 20-stone 6-on-6 monster. And that's what he did. He won't have that element of surprise going into the rematch, but ultimately Usyk is the best natural boxing heavyweight I've ever seen. I never thought he would be big enough for heavyweight. When Fury initially squared off against Usyk, his height gave him the advantage. However, as he prepares for his highly anticipated return to the ring, the seasoned fighter insists he's embracing his position as the underdog. He said, "I've always been a bad man my whole life, and I'm still one today at nearly 40 years old, a few years off 40. But I like to say that I'm going to go in there with destroy mode," as Alexander Usyk gears up for his highly anticipated rematch. With Tyson Fury, boxing legend Bernard Hopkins offers his backing to the Ukrainian star. A former undisputed champion, Hopkins has added his voice to the growing list of experts weighing in on the showdown, confidently predicting that Usyk will triumph once more over the reigning heavyweight champion. Hopkins said, "I think the smaller guy is really the big guy in heart and the big guy in talent. I believe Usyk has his number, and I believe that he's not a big heavyweight, which I think helps him in this particular fight. I just think he has the IQ that Tyson Fury won't be able to keep up and withstand as timer rounds go on. I like Usyk possibly by stoppage late, and not from a punch. I think it will just be a mercy call by the referee." In contrast, Duke McKenzie has cautioned Tyson Fury that adding weight ahead of his rematch with Alexander Usyk could play into Usyk's advantage. The UK's first ever three-weight world champion McKenzie believes that increasing Fury's already formidable size could backfire. He shared his thoughts on the subject during the most recent episode of Talk Sports Talk Boxing podcast. McKenzie said, "Fury doesn't live, eat, walk, talk the sport, but you're supposed to win. Between fights is where fights are won and lost. We know Fury blows up, puts on a load of weight between fights, and then he has got to get rid of all that weight again. Now they're trying to tell us that Fury is going to be bigger and better. Bigger and better isn't going to beat Usyk. It's really not," he added. "If he puts on more weight and thinks to himself, I'm going to bully Usyk this time, I'm going to go in and walk him down, I'll be able to take his shots because I'm that much bigger, it's not going to work for him. He's going to be slower, he's going to be more predictable, he's going to get hit more and a lot sooner." Usyk wins the rematch all day long. Although Fury was eager to point out that it wasn't the real Gypsy King, he claimed to be in the best shape of his life for his most recent fight last month. Fury posted a photo of his body prior to his defeat by Usyk on his Instagram story. Moreover, Tyson Fury is no stranger to rematches. The Gypsy King has faced Derek Chisora 3 times, first securing a decision victory followed by 2 dominant wins via TKO. Yet the trilogy that truly defines his career is the epic series of bouts against Deontay 7. So that's all from today's video. If you liked it, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and ring that bell icon so you never miss our upcoming videos.